In this episode, we're talking about warnings when picking up a new listing.
Vacation Rental Machine helps hosts just like you learn how to start, grow, and scale your short-term rental business. This show is all about creating systems that help you automate your business, giving you more time and money freedom. If you're ready to start living the vacation rental life, then subscribe to this podcast today. Come and join us on our Facebook group, The Host Nation, where we'll be talking about starting, automating, and scaling a short-term rental business. Now, on to the show.
All right, welcome back, Host Nation. I'm John Bell, and I'm here with my good friend Julian Sage, and we're talking about warnings, what things you guys should be on the lookout for when you're going out and getting new units, or maybe you picked up a unit and you're anxious and ready to get it listed, but there's a gotcha that you need to be careful of. We're going to talk about that today. Julian, I know you've got a couple of things ready for us. What's one of the first things that people fumble and actually fall right into?
One of the most common things that we often see is people going into HOAs. So HOAs is probably the most common that we do see people finding a property. HOAs, condos, they're very cheap. Maybe it's a townhouse, maybe it's a condo, but it's in a HOA. HOA, it's basically a little association. It's a housing association for that local community, and they dictate what you can or can't do in the properties. Now, condos, townhomes, they're just so often, and they really can be in really nice locations, and they're very affordable for people to be able to purchase or even rent out. But the big problem with that is the regulations for that association, because within an HOA, they can make up their own rules. They can choose whether they allow people to short-term rent. They can choose, what type of age demographic is allowed to even rent there. They can choose all of these different things, and you don't want to be acquiring a property thinking that, like, oh man, this is going to be really great. I see another person, it's listed on Airbnb in the same community, looks like they're fully booked, and then you get that property, and then you find out someone complains on you. And now the regulations, the HOA comes to you and they say, hey, you're not allowed to do this. And just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean that you can say like, hey, well, they're doing it. They'll very quickly just shut them down as well. So within an association, they're making up rules. So you have to be a part of the board of the association. And in that board, being a part of that board, then you can choose, the rules of that. But a lot of times there's people that live there for years and years and years and years in these places, and they don't like change. They don't like all this new Airbnb stuff. They don't want people coming in and out, and you have to think of it from their perspective. I mean, they're people that are living there, maybe their entire lives, and they don't want, maybe strangers, even though there's new people coming in and out as far as renters, they don't like the idea of people just coming in for a day or out. So HOAs is one of the most common, but we have to go a little bit broader than that. And we have to start when we're looking to acquire a property, whether that is through purchasing or master lease investing, is the county. So the county is actually more of that larger area where they also have their rules. So you think of it from like the top, you have your state, and the state will tell you, basically usually say it's up to the counties to decide how they run their local governing. And then from the county level, the county also breaks it up to individual municipalities. So, within a specific county, they could say, hey, this specific area, maybe the historic district or this area of this county is allowed to do this, while this area has their own local governance, and they're allowed to do that. So how you're able to find that out is, of course, go on Google and look up the specific county for where you're interested in either purchasing or leasing a property, and look up things like, short-term rental regulations or vacation rental regulations, short-term rental compliance, vacation rental compliance. Sometimes, like in the case of Tampa, you would think Tampa, Florida, being a very big, county, or Hillsborough County in Tampa. So Tampa's the city, Hillsborough County is the county, that because it is such a large area that they would have regulations. But when you go on Google, you're not going to find anything. The county hasn't made any decisions. So what that means for you is it really is a risk involved. Are you willing to accept the risk of you going into that county where they don't have any set regulations and then operating your business? They very could, decide like, hey, we're going to change things, or we're not going to allow this, or we're going to impose, restrictions. That very well could happen. So you do have to put that into consideration. So it is actually better to have some regulations in place, because that basically says like, hey, I know what the rules are. I know what I'm allowed to operate in. Second, once you've gone from the city to the county, now you're looking at the local municipality. So maybe there's an area within, let's say, Tampa, where it's a historic district. A historic district is going to be operated typically by a separate type of governance because they have their own rules on how they want the area to be. So maybe they don't want people modifying the homes, or maybe they impose certain restrictions on parking, or maybe they just don't allow people to short-term rent. Those are all things that can happen within a municipality, within a specific area, such as, let's say, historic areas.
So, Julian, is there ever just if I check all of that stuff, is there still one more that people just are overlooking?
Right. And now, a really common one that maybe you haven't really thought of is also zoning. So, just because the area allows for short term rentals, so let's say in our case, Miami, we know that Miami, you're allowed to short term rent in specific areas. So, Miami's broken down into, you have the Miami Dade County, but then there's also another municipality within Miami, which is the Miami Beach. Now, they operate different. But within the Miami-Dade area, even though you're allowed to short-term rent as long as you have the permits and you go through that process, the zoning is actually also what dictates where and how those permits are given out to you. So, what can happen is you can find a really nice property and you can want to, pick that up, whether purchase or master lease. But then when you go to apply for your permit, if the zoning is incorrect, if it's not allowed to, based off of how the zoning defines that specific area where that property is located, they might not give you a license, or they might impose different restrictions. So, like in the case of Miami, if you're in a low density area, so if you go onto the zoning map and you type in your address, you can actually find there's specific areas, low density, medium density, a bunch of these different acronyms. If your property falls within that specific low density area, then there has to be a property owner at the property 6 months out of the year. Now that could completely change. You're going in there thinking, I want to purchase this property, or I'm going to master lease it, and it's going to be all nice. It's a beautiful area. Come to find out, you've gone through all this process. You've purchased the property, you've furnished it, and now you're not allowed to short-term rent it. So this is the most important first step before you go out and just get excited and acquire a property. Find out your local regulations, find out the zoning, find out if you're allowed to. If there's not, then you can also reach out to people, reach out in the Facebook groups, reach out in the host nation, find other people that are hosting, and verify with them what have they found, and just try to collect that information. If the information's not there, then just heed that with caution that things can obviously change. But if you are interested in being more proactive and actually being involved in pushing towards more short-term rental advocacy, trying to get those things allowed, we're going to include some videos down below with our good friends, David Cross from Rent Responsibly, as well as Trisha. And they talk a lot more in depth about regulations, activism, how you can actually get involved and make short-term rentals allowed in your specific area and educate people. This is really important if you are growing your business, or if you're trying to make sure that your business is able to stay. So, question of the day: what are your local regulations? Leave it in the comments section down below. And until next time, Host Nation, keep on hosting. If you'd like John and I to answer your guys' questions, then be sure to go to the Host Nation Facebook group and use hashtag AskVRM. Hope you hosts found value in this episode. If you did, please go on over to iTunes and leave us a review, as that would greatly support the show. If you'd like to connect with John, the community, and I, then go on over to our Facebook group, The Host Nation. Talk to you hosts in the next episode. Keep on hosting.